life is a process of self-sustaining and self-generated action. That is a quote from Ayn Rand from the Objectivist Ethics. Um, doesn't I know a state isn't technically a living organism, but I think this very much can be applied here and to the state of Israel. Prerequisite of self-sustaining includes self-preservation, and a prerequisite of that is being aware of threats, of dangers to yourself. And one of the things, or some of the things that you would think would help raise such awareness are, for example, hordes of savages, flooding your country, raping and torturing and murdering anybody they come across, or a country and its proxies shooting rockets and drones and everything they can at you, or as much as they decide at that point at you, and trying to kill as many of your people. You would think that is a moment where self-preservation would kick in and the threat would be removed. That is not the case with the state of Israel, and has not been the case with the state of Israel for many decades. I mean, in the past, Israel really acted against its enemies, including preemptively when necessary. Often wasn't necessary to act preemptively because the enemies made it very clear that they want Israel wiped off the map. The enemies of Israel still make it clear that they want Israel wiped off the map, but Israel is now repeatedly refusing to act, or acting in as minimal and ineffective a manner as they can. And I think that the result of that cannot possibly be anything unless Israel reverses course at some point. The ultimate result is going to be death. Welcome to the reality show, day 192. I should check that before the show, but I think it's 192 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by Marco, Richard, and Jonathan will be joining soon. Marco, your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, that quote from the Objective Ethics is actually pretty damn good, because not only shows where morality comes from and why morality is objectively a certain way, but when she talks about self-sustaining process, she also means the action that the organism needs to take in order to survive, in order to live. And incidentally, that is why a human being needs to be free to choose its own actions in order to survive. And that's the whole basis of the idea of freedom. But applying this to the state is not a living organism. A state doesn't have a right as such, because rights are only attribute of an individual or a human being. But at the same time, you can apply the kind of idea that if Israel doesn't take the kind of actions, whether popular or not, which are required for its own survival, there's not going to be an Israel, down the line. Certainly not in another 70, 80 years. Israel has been around since 48 because the UN effectively created it. For the people who love so much international laws, they should respect the fact that the UN created Israel. So, but the point is that if Israel doesn't react to the kind of threats it's been subjected since, there's not going to be an Israel in a very short time.
And that slow death has been taking place pretty much ever since, and certainly since the Six-Day War, and more recently since the 79 and the Iranian Revolution. There, I think it's been a slow death by altruism, a slow death by appeasement, by evading the necessary measures that a country has to take in order to protect its citizenship. It's been a slow death because of the weakness of its allies, as well as its own moral sense of itself. And it's not only that it has a right to exist, but that it has a right to defend itself. And that is not accepted to the extent that it should be by many countries in the West for all sorts of reasons, which we've discussed. And practically, Israel has done all sorts of things which have always tried to take the softer approach wherever it can. Look at the war between the wars, for example, the campaign between the wars, where it was using intel and the IDF and intelligence services to try and disrupt the supplies to Hezbollah via Syria and try and lessen everything as quietly as possible without even causing deaths of military abroad. And of course, then that then has to step up because it's unsuccessful. So, you know, although it is able to remove a suspected nuclear reactor in Syria in 2007 or in 2008, assassinate Suleiman, and that kind of that still doesn't prove enough. Those little piecemeal measures aren't sufficient to ensure its safety. Even when you're trying to dissuade countries from working together, like trying to dissuade Assad from working with Iran, which was obviously the case when it came to the assassination of Suleiman. And of course, more recently, we've seen other assassinations, which is again, it's cautious, targeted. Sometimes it's effective. Look at the Syed Razi Mousavi, the high-ranking general that was assassinated in December in Damascus, December last year, and then at the 1st of April, the Zahedi, the top IRGC soldier who assassinated there in Damascus. Now, all of that is good steps in itself, but it's not sufficient, clearly, because you've ended up in October the 7th, you've ended up now with this massive attack coming from Iran. So it's clear that Israel has always taken the soft path, and it's always prolonged the long-term threat to itself.
Jonathan.
I want to say a bit about the slow death within Israeli society. In the days approaching this attack, you could have seen, you're still seeing sheer panic among the people, waiting for the Iranian attack. You could see, well, besides that, we have the war, of course, so we have protests, tens of thousands of people blocking traffic around the country, calling for a ceasefire. You have, all these political bickering. Those people who want the election now, those people who want, they want this, they want that. There is real, how would I put it? Everybody is at each other. And this is a time of war. This is not what we want. Whilst we are fighting for our own existence, whilst we are battling against the worst Jew killers since the Holocaust. That is not something we are doing. And if you look at that, you can see we're not really winning. And if we will not win this war, it means the death of Israel, because it has failed to do its own fundamental job as a state. It has failed to protect its citizens' lives in October 7th, and it has failed to deliver on the war that ensues afterwards. Especially if we don't respond to the Iranians, there's no future. The people of the north, they are all now living in the center. The people of the south, they left the south. You have abandoned cities, villages, kibbutzim, are burned down. And where's the light in this cave? I don't see it. The only place I could see it is in Rafah, is if we attack Iran. But do we hear voices from within Israel calling for that? Very few. I do hear some such voices. But if you look at the media, if you look at the protests, what you see are calls for surrender, are calls for ceasefire, for unconditional surrender. And just fear controls everything. Fear and defeatism. And that is not a sign of a flourishing state. And it is very, very concerning.
So what I've seen in Israeli media over the last couple of days, including mainstream media, are calls to act, not unanimously, but there are many calls to take military action against Iran because, Israel, needs to bring back its kind of show that it can defend itself. But the thing is, I remember those calls from after October 7th, and those very quickly changed into what you're seeing now, which is protests demanding that Israel give in to Hamas in the negotiations, even more than it already has in negotiations that shouldn't happen in the first place. I think there is also some consensus that some Rafah operation needs to happen, but it is the speed at which public opinion in Israel shift, it's almost as fast as the speed at which policy by Israel's so-called allies shifts from being Israel's BFFs at the moment that Israel is attacked to being Israel's no longer allies when it actually responds militarily rather than responds with cowardice. Just another point on that, because somebody in the chat before the show, just based on this title, was upset and said, I don't know who you were calling cowards, because the Israeli army is the bravest army in the world. It has 1 million enemies all around. It takes care of business all the time. This was absolutely not about Israeli soldiers. They are brave. They're going into this absolute shithole surrounded by savages and fighting bravely. And the problem is the Israeli leadership knows about their bravery and really misuses them to treat them as cannon fodder for diplomatic gains or minimizing diplomatic losses by saying, well, look, we're doing everything we can to prevent the other side from having any civilian casualties, even at the cost of our own soldiers, which of course is not a price that Israel should ever agree to pay. But yeah, the soldiers are absolutely brave, and we've said on this channel, I've certainly said how much, and I've gotten criticism even from the pro-Israel side for saying, I love those videos of soldiers, celebrating the fact that they are taking over Gaza and Gazan life, and saying you are actually paying now the price that you deserve to pay. Unfortunately, I think the price should be much higher, and the price Israel pays should be much lower.
If there is, Razi, a reason to be optimistic, is these videos with these soldiers. That is one of the best signs about Israeli culture, and one of the reasons that I wish to remain in Israel is that you see these same generations around the world, what they are marching for and what our generation is doing, and it is incomparable how this generation, at least, is much healthier, morally speaking. They can tell right from wrong, and they actually go out for the right.
Yeah, and that's also an amazing point. I don't think these 19, 20-year-old kids have, fully thought out code of ethics. I certainly don't know how many of them, certainly not many, would agree with ours. No. And yet they act morally just because it's kind of clear to them. In large part, maybe they're too young to have absorbed the bullshit that the world puts in people's minds, or that people tend to accept throughout life. Marco.
Yeah, I mean, Israel is a westernized, civilized country, which unfortunately happens to be in the Middle Ages, surrounded by people from the Middle Ages. And of course, it's natural for them to pick up the kind of ideas and culture that is pervasive in the West. This kind of mongrel of altruism, mixed economy, sense of duty-bound, philosophy, all this kind of stuff that literally kills you. And we see it on a daily basis. Just take, I mean, how can they possibly behave in a proper moral way when, Gazan terrorists blow up their own hospital and Israel gets blamed for, and the whole world blames Israel. And then the Iranian send over 331 weapons, missiles, drones, and ballistic missiles, indiscriminately. They could have hit schools, hospitals, all sorts of civilian targets, but nobody gives a crap. Suddenly, it's Israel's fault for trying to defend itself from the continuous attack of Iran through its own proxies. just because Israel has the temerity to stand up for its own values, which we don't have in the West, just look what's happening with the Houthis. I mean, the Houthis should have been flattened the first time they sent the first rocket, but we put up with them, we excuse them, and we know Iran is behind it. But still, we say to Iran, "Oh, okay, you got the right to throw a few missiles randomly to the Israeli population." This is absolutely upside down. This kind of mentality is what keeps the war going forever, what keeps the war open for 70 odd years, and what's going to keep it open for until probably the destruction of Israel at this rate.
And it seems that when it comes to the Western allies' attitudes towards Israel, it's always that only Israel is the one that can provoke a full-scale war. The other side is never accused of that. October the 7th wasn't accused of provoking a full-scale war from Hamas, was it? And all of the events of the weekend, the ballistic missiles, the cruise missiles, the coordinated military attack, surely that is provoking a full-scale war, isn't it? No, it's always Israel that must show restraint. And I'd call that hypocrisy from the Western allies, except that it's consistent. It's consistently called for Israel to hold back in every scenario. Look at how Biden reacted with his take the win comment, where win and victory is being treated as you got to win. You weren't annihilated. Congratulations. You didn't have casualties today, but that's great. Take it as a win. But you're forbidden from preventing casualties tomorrow. And that's what Israel should be doing, preventing casualties tomorrow from exactly the same source, which is Iran. And it's not the first time that Iran has attacked, is it? In 2018, didn't they throw 30-odd rockets to the Golan Heights? And then Israel responded against Syrian targets and pushed back for a while, but only for a while, of course, because was the response strong enough? No, it just allows Iran to build up, to grow more strength, to grow more allies, more allegiances, and for the West itself to weaken itself, weaken its support for Israel, become a more moral vacuum so that Iran can do what it likes, and these are the consequences.
Every week or two since the war started, we hear of some incident where see some footage of Israel, killing somebody who supposedly was unarmed. And I've mentioned on this channel that I saw like a couple of weeks after October 7th, an interview with a soldier on Israeli television who said that they were seeing people crossing the fence, but they saw that they were unarmed, so they stood down because that was the order. Maybe they're going in for work or something. And one has to wonder if Israel had actually managed somehow to kill the people who were crossing the fence. And thousands, 3,000, or however many, I don't know how many crossed in the first, I think it was maybe more like 1,000, but 1,000 Palestinians had been killed. And surely Hamas would not have said, well, we had this whole plan, to go to take over some villages, to go murder people in a music festival. No, they would have said, look, we're in an open air prison. We just want to eat. The international outrage for Israel had they killed those terrorists preemptively, but as soon as they crossed the fence, or preemptively, but in Gaza, would have been, I think, much worse than what Israel is currently going through from its so-called allies. Yeah, I had a point to make with that, but yeah, my point is ultimately, when Israel tries to prevent something or succeeds in prevent something, it is supposedly a win. And yeah, any type of action, the idea that these so-called allies now, after such a massive act of war, even if this was, Iran didn't expect to annihilate Israel from this, which I'm sure they didn't, the idea that this would have your allies say to you, you should not act militarily in response to this act of war, shows you really that these are not allies. These are not allies in this scenario, and you should sometimes, when you have to, you should go it alone.
These are allies of Iran. That's not allies for Israel. Yeah, it's like when Piers Morgan wrote that Israel must show restraint. That sounds like a threat, doesn't it? Piers is kind of threatening us, or else. What you gonna do, Piers? Bring some anti-Semites to interview? Oh, you already done that. Yeah, and the idea that this is a win is such a great manifestation of altruism on this level. As an altruist, you're allowed not to die only because you can keep sacrificing yourself. So Israel is allowed to take down the Iranian missiles because that way it could continue to be a good altruist by giving the Gazans some military aid, the humanitarian military aid, and all that. You could continue sacrificing its soldiers. That's the only way it's good for Israel to act. If Israel would have acted selfishly and retaliated and attacked Iran when it hurts the most, that will be egoistic. That will be taking care of oneself, and that is verboten. That is not a good thing according to Piers Morgan and any of Israel's allies. And did you know that just a few days ago, or was it yesterday, Biden had the Iraqi prime minister visiting him in the White House? Did you see that image? The Iraqi prime minister, the country from everything came through their airspace. So who's really the U.S. allies with? I'm starting. I think it begins to be very, very clear from it's just a sophisticated move by the U.S. To defeat Israel. It's very sophisticated. They hold us on a leash with the fact that they are our sole military arms supplier. So we cannot do anything we want unless they approve. And they would let us survive, but they would never let us win. So as far as I'm concerned, that's acting like enemies, not allies. So and the slow death comes from the fact that we are so submissive to that. We're just, well, it is again, I want to say add the nuance that this is still early, and we could it's still possible for Israel to retaliate properly, and I really hope that it will happen. There are a lot of voices that call for it. I really hope that it will be the case, but there's a good chance it will never happen. And I probably am guessing that that's what will happen, unfortunately. So long as we don't retaliate, this is the death of Israel. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me that Piers Morgan exists. It's been a while, but we have I think it's a new troll in the chat, and I'm not, don't worry, I'm not gonna feed the troll too much, but one of the points, I'm already giving him too much credit. The one coherent sentence that I can find here is something, although it requires punctuation. You guys are on your own, nobody is going to back you. And Israel unfortunately cares about that. To me, the correct response to that is, good. I'd rather be alone than with people like you on my side. And that's the thing. There are many people in the world, in countries that don't support Israel, even in countries that are fully against Israel. We did multiple episodes about South Africa after South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice. And we were flooded by support from South Africa on our small YouTube channel. I can only imagine how many people in South Africa, who don't know if they'll have clean water to drink the next day, are not happy with their government spending all this probably Iranian money on suing Israel. Yeah, there are good people out there in the world, and it's not a numbers game. I mean, if it was a numbers game, Israel would have been annihilated in May of 1948, or at any point between May of 1948 and today or this past Saturday. So, the kind of one of the differences when we look at the defense capabilities, that again, it's amazing that this is an amazing feat of the human mind. The way all these drones and rockets could be shot down. And I disagree with the fact that no offensive action is taken, but that is amazing. And then on the other hand, you see that some Iranian, by some reports, like half of what they shot didn't make it. It was kind of like kind of like Palestinian rockets. Half of it falls on their own people.
Worse than Palestinian rockets.
Yeah. So yeah. Basically, it's not a numbers game. It's certainly a quality game. So yeah, when I see the incoherent trolls in the chat, I think we're trying to promote ideas, get more people on our side, but we are selective and not everybody's welcome. Marco.
Also, rather just
Yeah.
before that, if I may, there is a virtue I think to fight. There's a really big virtue to fight on your own for your values. And that is why one reason that I see the people, for example, the brave people from the Warsaw uprising, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, 1943, who fought themselves against it was absolutely impossible, but they wanted to go down fighting. And I think there's massive virtue in that. And I think Israel should adopt that mentality. But I think our odds are much better than those people of the Warsaw Ghetto. So we might as well go down with a bang.
Yeah, fighting on your own for your values, or fighting with anybody who shares your values, and not begging those who have opposite values to accept that if you're in the right, you don't need to convince those who are in the wrong to be okay with you acting on your values. Marco.
Yeah, after all, a state, a government, is a human institution. It's something created by men who freely decide to get together and manage a territory where they live in through a certain state, through a certain political structure. And if the state wants to have any legitimacy, has to leave those humans decide to create a state free. And all it has to do is to protect the freedom of those individuals who give up the right to defend themselves. They give it to the state, so that the state as a whole protects them from foreign attacks and provides the tools for the resolution of conflict within its own boundary. So a state, somebody like the United States, telling Israel not to carry out the only function that the state has is just preposterous. Coming from David Cameron, it's like even laughable. I mean, the guy has a security attachment as a former prime minister, so he can afford to tell somebody, oh, go in the middle of the street, you're gonna be victorious if you don't get stabbed in the face. It's like, what kind of reason is that? Just the fact, because Israel has got a very efficient system, Iron Dome and the Arrow and all those kind of systems, it doesn't mean that should be the ultimate goal. If you have a threat, you have to remove the threat. You don't just build bunker for your people so they can hide in there like rats. You defend them by getting rid of the threat, making sure that the population that forms your nation, your state, is not under constant threat, so they can carry on their life, their productive life, and achieve happiness and productivity. You cannot just live on the idea that, well, we got this umbrella, so it doesn't matter if it rains. Well, it's ridiculous. And getting these foreign politicians trying to tell Israel what to do, not really understanding what the issue is because they live in their big fat cages, it's just preposterous.
I want to say a word about the foreign powers and the Western allies, because obviously the Western allies were a part of the defense of the other night. And obviously the US Navy were helping to shoot down 4 to 6 ballistic missiles, the worst kind. And obviously the UK were also shooting down some drones over Jordan and that kind of stuff as well. So obviously this was a combined effort from the allies from that point of view. But what you want to look at is what Cameron says afterwards, for example, when he's talking about what the RAF did in shooting down those drones. He's talking about the fact that it was de-escalating. It was de-escalating the conflict by stopping the drones from landing on Israel. Now, de-escalating is what? What is it? It's protecting Iran's reputation as an aggressor by making sure it doesn't land and cause them trouble. I mean, de-escalating is then used as a means for saying to Israel, you can't attack back. You can't attack the source of where those missiles came from, where they were flown from, because that would be escalating. So the use of the terms is just ludicrous. And then when you hear what Tehran has been saying subsequent to the attack, and here's a couple of quotes from them, and I quote them with, one eyebrow raised. But the West should appreciate our restraint in its attack on Israel, and it was an act of self-defense. Well, apart from the fact that this is a dictatorship, and obviously that's rhetoric and gaslighting and the standard kind of propaganda you would expect, what does that also betray? It also betrays such a legacy of moral equivalence coming from the West, of grey compromise, which has emboldened people like that to use the kind of altruistic terms and the kind of terms that have been used in editorials and newsrooms across the world to make it look like this is even and that there's no good and evil here. It's just two sides going tit for tat. That's what I find quite repugnant in what they came out of Tehran.
Yeah, and kind of repeating what I said before, but the test of the allies, the strength of the alliance with Israel or their support for Israel is going to be in the response. But that test they have failed it with Hamas. With Hamas, it's a much easier test because Israel doesn't need anybody's help to deal with Hamas. They just need people to stay out of the way. And nobody did that. They didn't stay out of the way. They flew to Israel immediately. All their leaders flew to Israel to, show their support, but urge Netanyahu not to act with the type of power that would be necessary in order to defeat just Hamas. Not to even say, like, he would not say what we're saying, which is the Palestinian people are the enemy and they need to be defeated. But even to act against Hamas, this was unacceptable to the West. They showed sympathy for the Israel being the victim of savagery, but they showed no sympathy for Israel wanting to respond. And we're seeing the same thing again. And so there are reports that I'm reading that still now that Israel might act imminently. It might be today. It might be in Iran, like on Iranian soil. What exactly it's going to be, remains to be seen. I think it's less clear than it is with Iran. With Iran, I didn't expect more than we saw. I actually would have expected a bit less, although I wasn't sure. But yeah, we'll see how the world responds to that because David Cameron said that Iran had the right to respond to the killing of their people in Syria, but this response was disproportionate. Let's see if he says something different about Israel. If he says the same, he confirms what you already know, which is Britain is nominally an ally of Israel and actually an ally of its enemies.
So Razi, just to add, the Cameron has an additional reason why he should shut his face, just hide himself in a room and never come out ever again. Because in 2015, he was part with Obama. He was prime minister in Britain. And with Obama, he put together this terrible deal which allowed Iran production of nuclear material, allowed them to have a certain amount of centrifuges, machines, and allow them to produce uranium. Do you really think Iranians are going to be restrained when they manage to get enough to create a bomb?
Yeah, and
I don't. And one of my favorite moments, since I moved to this country 16 years ago, was seeing the exit polls, the whole night of seeing the exit polls and seeing that the Brexit side lost, and Nigel Farage as well was conceding, and everybody was, most of the media was happy, but then the votes came in and they were counted, and then eventually Brexit won, which was such fantastic news. And then David Cameron resigned, which may have been even better news. And I thought, okay, we're not going to see that piece of shit again, because that's in British politics, that's usually how it goes. Like, you failed as prime minister, you move on and get some lobbying job, or work at Facebook or whatever. You move on and you make a lot more money, but you cause a lot less harm. So yeah, how he's back, I don't know, but yeah, Marco, if yeah, I hope he takes you up on his on your suggestion.
He
I
wasn't
doubt it.
elected back, that's for sure, isn't it? He wasn't elected back. He was parachuted in via the back door,
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is equally, goes. That's the only way he could get back.
yeah,
Maybe he learned that lesson of coming back and never leaving it from Netanyahu. And I really can't believe that we have brought this bastard to ground zero, to where they done October 7th, to all these kibbutzim. I can't believe that we've brought this person here. He has seen evil with his own two eyes, and yet is acting in support of that evil. What a terrible human being. About the restraint and the de-escalation, I think it's another word for appeasement. They're calling out for appeasement. And one thing that cannot be said to Chamberlain's credit, or it can be said to Chamberlain's credit, he didn't know what he was really dealing with. He was kind of naive, but they have history. They can learn. They can go back and see what happens when you try to appease evil. And the Iranians, they are as evil as the Nazis. They have exactly the same aspirations. They have exactly the same evil motives, motivations. They want to destroy the Jews again. That is the same thing. And he cannot see that. He just wants to go out and appease them, to de-escalate the situation. But what he really does with all this de-escalation, he is escalating the time that it will take for the state of Israel to die. This is what they're doing with all these de-escalation calls. They're setting us on an accelerated, or what's the word? Accelerated path to destruction by all this de-escalation. And that is really, really evil. And the entire Western world seems to have been taken over by this virtue of de-escalation. It has become the primary virtue. Let's just let's just de-escalate. Let's just life can go on. And it's evasion. It's refusing to look reality in the eyes. That's what they're doing. They're refusing to see reality. They think they can wish and things will just settle down, but they won't. And that's evasion. And as we know, evasion is the root, is where evil begins, when there is evasion, and that is where evil flourishes as well. And that's how we got to this place, and how we will continue to go down this path if we continue this appeasement path.
So I want to thank PC. Thank you for the super chat, and I'll read the question, and you guys can answer. This is, of course, going to be speculation on our part. PC asks, will Israel respond?
I really hope so. I really, really hope so. But I was also hopeful for Rafah, and I don't see it happening anytime soon. So I don't know. I want to say yes. The question is how. Would it just attack some bases in Syria? They're doing it. They've done that. Will they attack the nuclear plants? And will they attack the oil fields? I'm kind of skeptical. I really hope so.
Yeah, my answer was also going to be yes, Israel will respond. It just will respond in whatever way it can tell itself. The leadership can tell themselves, we have responded, and what kind of effect that has, we will see. I mean, it could be that a year from now, some scientist has an accident in Iran, and Israel will say, well, that was our response, or of course won't say, because we don't know how that scientist that accident happened. But yeah, but just to respect the super chat, I will say, if you mean, will Israel respond militarily directly against Iran? I don't know. I hope so. Yeah, that's not a good answer. Marco.
Well, the only appropriate response right now from Israel would be flicking the finger to its allies and going and destroying every single facility that can put their bombs on in Iran. The problem is, even responding, if you don't get rid of all the nuclear facilities, most of the bases, most of the Iranian guards, whatever they're called, the army in Iran, there's no point in responding at all. That's not a response. That's an half-assed attempt to just kick the can down the road again. And where's it going to get you? I can only forgive Netanyahu if he's trying to build a sort of a bigger coalition of people in order to hammer Iran seriously. But I really find it hard to believe this is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I saw President Herzog on Sky News talking about the fact that the weekend attack by Iran was a declaration of war. And of course it is, isn't it? Firing hundreds of missiles at a country is a declaration of war by anybody's measure, isn't it? So it entitles a response. It entitles a firm, strong response. And let's hope that they do it. I read an article in The Guardian where Netanyahu was described as long considered an Iranian hawk. An Iranian hawk as opposed to who? Obama? I mean, we will see if he's an Iranian hawk. He will have a chance to show that now. He's got all the necessary moral authority to do so, and we're going to find out, I guess. I think one of the things that I have a question over myself is the extent to which Iran wanted this to succeed or not, the extent to which it thought it would be more successful than it was or not, because obviously this was so flagged up in Iran in advance. Now, was that intentional? Was that the fact that Iran contacted various Middle Eastern countries and either directly or indirectly they told the US told Israel, and effectively it was all public news that an attack was coming from Iran. We all knew that a few days in advance. So on that basis, did the news get out when Iran didn't want it to get out, or is it more the fact that they were doing a certain kind of attack where they wanted to demonstrate some efficacy, more so than they actually did, because I'm sure they didn't expect every single rocket to be stopped. And when I see Gilad Erdan, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, showing the footage in the UN of them shooting down air attacks above the Al-Aqsa Mosque and above Temple Mount. Now, if those had hit, this would be spun in a completely different way, wouldn't it? And who would be accused of having blown up what? So it's very difficult to speculate what even was the intent for what's already happened, let alone what will happen next and how successful and in what form that will take.
Yeah, so first of all, Netanyahu is a hawk, the greatest of hawks when it comes to Iran rhetorically. I mean, nobody speaks about how bad a threat Iran is like Netanyahu, and he's been doing that for decades, and he was right all along in everything he said. He went to the UN, had all these drawings where he pointed out stuff on the drawing of the bomb, and but when he is in power, as we know from Netanyahu, he acts in the exact opposite way of what he says, which makes it worse than if he acted like that without saying it, because it's clear that he knows what the right course of action is and chooses the exact opposite because, unfortunately, he is a coward. In terms of Iran's intention, I don't know if they expected to kill anybody. I don't know what they certainly, this was not them delivering the promise of wiping Israel off the map. I'm sure they plan for that to happen, and I'm sure they know they don't have the military capabilities to do that now. So they did, in a way, this is the equivalent of, obviously not the same thing in any way, but when Israel gets attacked by rockets and then bombs an empty building somewhere and says, "Look, we responded." So yeah, I think Iran wouldn't threaten for weeks, wouldn't let people know, wouldn't shoot these very, very slow drones. This is not the way, and it wouldn't be 300, it would be a lot more. If Iran decided now is the time where we deliver on the promise of wiping out Israel, yeah, this would not be what they did. And of course, this is also a test, not just a military test, but a diplomacy test, because right after they said, look, we're done. We're not going to do anything else. They said it, and they said, unless Israel responds, and then our response to that will be much worse, which is a way for them to signal to Biden, make sure that they don't do what they probably want to do. And of course, Biden followed Iran's orders perfectly. Jonathan, I hope you're not distracted by all the comments about the way you dress and all that. But yeah,
I find them
that in the
rather
chat.
amusing.
All right, Jonathan, yeah, you're next.
About the hair comments or the
Oh,
style?
about if whatever you'd like to comment on.
Well, I would say it's not 1950s, and I agree there's more to be desired when it comes to my hair. But yeah. Anyway, what were we saying? I think Israel, if it wants to survive as a nation, it has to reply, and it has to send a very strong message to its own people that it's there for them, that it's there for their own protection. I was sitting at my house during this night. I was watching the news. I couldn't sleep. It was about 9:30 a.m. and I was watching live on live telly. You can see the interceptions on live television. I thought that was quite the scene, and people could see stuff when they were outside as well. That is not a sign of a well-run country. That is not a sign of a country that its own people can live a flourishing life whilst they are fearful for their own existence. That is not good, because also I noticed that on myself, it's much harder to plan for the long term, while when your short term is kind of under the question mark. Maybe the Iranians will throw a bomb and I will perish tomorrow. Who knows, right? You have that. Not that I'm thinking about that would be irrational, but still, people, they get panic attacks. It affects the entire society, and that is not good. And if we want to survive, we have to combat it as strongly as possible.
Yeah, by the way, I was also watching that footage on Israeli television of the drones and rockets and whatever being shot down, being intercepted, while the news anchors were saying, people should stay in the protected spaces, and also don't film the missiles intercepting. It's dangerous, or it could be debris, but they broadcast all of it. That was interesting, Marco.
Yeah, to answer Richard's question, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if they expected all the drones to be knocked down, whether they expected them to go through. They still launch them. There is a consequence to your actions. If a bunch of Islamic baboons in Iran, the dictators of Iran who subjugate their own population under the cosh of a non-existing ghost in the sky, if those people decide to do something, well, the population, because they represent the government of those people, will have to suffer the consequences. So it doesn't matter whether because Israel has got a great protection in the IDF and the various anti-missiles structures, they managed to knock them down. And thanks to the alliance with the other countries, they managed to stop them before they landed and kill somebody. It doesn't matter. The intention of Iran was to launch 331 weapons at Israel. They did it. They chose to do it. And the real sinister thing here is that Iran is behaving now like it's got the moral high ground. Look at us. We were restrained, really. But and now we consider the matter concluded. It's what? You're just trying to destroy half of Israel, and you're calling the matter concluded because now you don't want the retaliation. That's just insane. It's just absolutely insane. And the fact that they say, "Oh, if you attack us, we're gonna attack back even harder." That's the kind of stance that Israel should have. That's the kind of concept that a legitimate state should be so bold to tell anyone who tries to attack their population that they're gonna be wiped out. But here we have the aggressors behaving like they are little angels. That's just ridiculous. And the fact that France is too busy trying not to upset the Muslims because they got an Olympic coming up, and so they're hiding in the background. They take part, but not really. Please don't mention us. We weren't there. So trying to give moral high ground to these monsters, to these Islamic nutters, is just ridiculous. When you can't get the ticket for the opening ceremony in Paris this summer, it's not going to be because of Israeli terrorists. It's going to be because Islamic-inspired terrorists. So to try and focus on who's the enemy here and who's the victim.
Yeah, the fact they're having to already scale down by half the number of people who can attend that opening ceremony because of security concerns shows the effect of this, even within Europe on that level. I think one of the things that people are saying is that this makes Iran look weaker than it was because those weapons were stopped. Now, that is a dangerous conclusion. That leads people to appease even more because they assume that Iran is weaker than it is, and that this was the extent of what it was capable of, and that it couldn't do worse. Well, that is just a short road to a very violent death, isn't it? In the near future, if you follow that line and appease to that extent. I think Elon Levy was on TV the other day, and I saw him talking about the fact that this cannot be the new normal. This cannot be the new normal that ballistic missiles are fired at a country, you shoot them down, and that's it. That you just take it on the chin. You trust in your defenses to stop them, but you do not stop them at the source, or you do not, and that you should just accept that as a standard way that people are going to fire, going to set the sirens off. Everyone's going to hide underground. We're going to wait till it's over. We're going to come out again, and we're going to pretend we don't have a problem. And just to appease all our allies. Well, that cannot be the answer. You've moved from having rocks thrown at soldiers at checkpoints to missiles being fired from Gaza, and now you're talking about ballistic missiles not being enough to bring Israel to the fight properly. What happens next? How far does this have to go before Israel really clamps down? Because you cannot wait forever. You cannot evade this.
Monitoring the chat here, Christopher, if you want to elaborate on what you think that troll is doing, as far as I can see, it's just lots of comments that are incoherent. So I didn't think it was worthy of a ban yet, but let me know if there's something I'm missing, because I'm sure there is. And yeah, I see that Jonathan, the way you dress is now becoming a whole topic of conversation. I love the fact that we have some, I don't know if it's flirting, but so some positive comments. Jonathan is taken, but we do encourage flirting and romance in the live chat as well.
Especially in the super chat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that even more so. I think the person in most desperate need of some love is this troll here, but I wouldn't fix him up with anyone. There's all right, from the kind of semi-humorous stuff to something less funny. So this is just a headline that I saw during the show. About the negotiations over a deal to release some of the hostages in exchange for terrorists. So I'll just briefly remind people of the timeline, because it's very much in line with what we've been saying. There was a deal, of course. I think we all agree here that no such negotiation should happen in the first place, and no such deals should happen. But even as these deals go, there was one in November, which was a week-long ceasefire, 150 terrorists, none of whom succeeded in murdering their victims in exchange for 50 hostages. Israel has sent, there was some, there was an ongoing military campaign then. Right now, there isn't. There is a de facto ceasefire in Gaza. Israel is barely operating in Gaza at the moment. So right now, the latest deal that I saw being offered by Israel was 900 terrorists, 100 of whom succeeded in murdering their victims in exchange for 40 hostages. Hamas last week was reported to have said that they don't have 40 living hostages to give in that part of the deal. Oh, and another thing was like a 6 to 8 week ceasefire. Now, there's the latest is that Hamas said they will agree to release less than 20 hostages over a 6 week ceasefire, and of course want Israel to kind of move what few troops they still have there back. This is proof that even if steps are taken that slightly resemble what we're recommending, just a little more than what Israel does, then it's better for Israel because Hamas, when they were under pressure, agreed to a less disastrous deal, and the less military action you take, the stronger your enemies are. This is not a conflict, not with the Palestinians, not with Hezbollah, not with Iran, that can end in any way other than military action. And it will end with military action. It could be the end of Israel via military action if Israel continues on its current path. Unfortunately, that is what I believe. But it could be the end of Israel's enemies if they take our advice and actually respond. I saw earlier that, and I'm only bringing this up because of the context. The troll said something like Israel won't exist in 10 years. And yesterday, I was actually on the phone with Mark Pellegrino, a regular on this channel, who asked me, "Do you think Israel would exist in 10 years?" And I said, I don't know, but if Israel continues on, I would be surprised. I think I said I don't expect, if I die of old age, I expect to outlive Israel. And I very, very much hope I'm wrong. I don't believe that Israel will actually act unless something really bad happens. And even with something really bad happens, the action seems to be very limited. I hope something will change, and I hope Israel will fight for itself. But if it doesn't, its enemies won't say, okay, you're not defending yourself, we will stop attacking you. They are emboldened by every single time that Israel doesn't respond or doesn't respond with force. So the slow death of Israel is something that can be prevented, but it can only be prevented by Israel. Final words and where people can find more from you, Jonathan.
People can find more of me on my Substack, philosophyIneeded.com, link in the description.
And Marco, Richard?
Yes, we distill short videos from these conversations across the topic, and you can find them in 2 minutes, length roughly, and in short version on the Daily Objective Briefly Objective sister channel to this one. And you can just share them and just look at them if you want to clarify stuff, but send it to people who are not terribly clear about some of the issues we're talking about.
And if you want to find a link to that channel in the description below this, it says for shorter content, click here, and that will take you straight to the Briefly Objective where you find all those videos.
Yeah, and I am at Razi Ginzberg on X. We are here every day with the Daily Objective, every weekday with the reality show. If you consider this content valuable, comment, like, share, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And you can also become a member and get access to additional content and support our work. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.